Park City Diner. As a commissioned salesman for an engineered products company, we sold a rather eclectic array of products that normally took some engineering expertise to properly size the product for specific applications. Due to this, we had to attend schooling, normally located at the factory. This training took place in Provo, Utah. I and another person named Ron were hired on the same day, so we normally attended these training schools at the same time. The company we worked for was rather non-conventional. Our company had a rather bad reputation when it come to being a bad boy while we were gone, so the rules of conduct were rather loose. Basically, if we finished in the top 10% of our classes, our choices of nightlife were never questioned. This night, we were asked to go to Park City, to ride the scooters down the ski hill and attend a dinner at a nice restaurant. The training company was owned by a family of Mormons, who were not very keen on the idea of drinking in the first place. Holding true to form, our room ended up as the bar. The other attendees would bring their booze to our room for storage, as their bosses frowned on rowdy behavior. Before leaving, we had a few drinks, and Ron, as always, had more than the rest of us. The host company rented a few vans, and we all piled in to be transported up the mountain for the night's activities. Ron and I shared a seat mainly because nobody would sit with us. It was a fun trip up the mountain, with a lot of talking and giving each other good-natured ribbing. By the time we got to the ski hill, Ron was wound as tight as an 8-day clock. Upon arrival, we lined up to ride the ski lift up the mountain and then ride the scooters back down. The idea was to sit in a scooter placed inside of a half pipe and then coast down the hill through curves, over bumps, and drop-offs. You controlled the speed with a handbrake. Sounds simple, right? You can make anything complicated if you put your mind to it. We lined up and chose our scooter and placed them in the half pipe. The person at the top of the hill would start 2 people at the same time in separate troughs so they could race. It just so happened that Ron was behind me in line. Thank heavens. The last thing I remember was a young boy saying to Ron, "You want to race, old man?" Ron was a ripe old age of 26 at the time, and this kid looked like he was about 12 or 13 years old. Ron, being extremely competitive, told him the race was on. I left the starting spot and proceeded down the hill. It was fun, and I saw bank curves that were sure to wreck you if you went too fast, even throw you off the track. When I got to the bottom, I looked back up the hill, waiting for Ron to finish. Finally, the young kid finished. No sign of Ron. After 3 other people finished on Ron's track, I started to worry. You can't pass, so where the hell is Ron? A few minutes later, I caught sight of Ron as he finished his run. He had torn his shirt and had grass stain on his pants. His hair was messed up, and he looked overall just beat up. Laughing, I asked what had happened. He thought for a second, looked at me, and told me the little kid was pretty good. They had raced neck and neck until the first major bank curve. This was the first time he was thrown off the track. He didn't just fall off, he hit the ground and rolled. He jumped up and ran back to the track and restarted. He said there must have been somebody who passed him while he was rolling in the grass. Trying to get caught back up, he drove well over his head. Everything went well until the next major curve. Once again, he was thrown off the track and rolled on the ground. By this time, he had 2 others pass him while he was rolling around. He eventually finished. With this, our Mormon hosts were a little bit perturbed, and we were asked to get in the van. Ron was somewhat quiet on the ride to the restaurant. Why, I have no idea. He'd already set the precedence. He was never quiet. About the time we got to the restaurant, he told me he needed another drink. Oh, yeah. We arrived at the very nice restaurant, got out of the van, and walked from the bright sunlight into a dark building. I couldn't see a thing when we got inside. Rather than wait for our eyes to adjust, Ron and I proceeded to the table set up for us. It looked nice. The table was long, with white tablecloths. The plates and silverware were all in place. Candles were lit, and there were numerous carafes of water and red wine open and ready for use. The table was sitting so that one side used bench seats and the other side used chairs. Ron and I went to the end of the table. He stepped around the end of that table and slid into one of the bench seats. Unbeknownst to us, the end of this table had no bench seats and no chairs. Ron started to sit down. Bad move. There was no seat. His sitting motion had started, something you can't stop until your butt hits the seat, and he went directly to the floor. On his way down, he did what a person would naturally do. He reached out and grabbed for something. That something, in this case, was a tablecloth. As he fell backwards and pulled, the plates clattered to the floor, the water and the wine dumped, the carafe of red wine was sitting at the end of the table, and of course it spilled all over it. What a mess. I laughed so hard I cried. By this time our hosts were embarrassed and angry. The rest of the dinner was uneventful, and we eventually ended up back at our motel. It wasn't long until a few guys came to our room to drink. Since the first day of training, there was a guy from Texas who told Ron he could pick up 3 people at the same time. Ron, of course, told him he's full of it. We were all salespeople, and the guy just kept selling. He started in again, and finally Ron told him it's time to prove what he said. Earlier that day, the guy from Texas told me I would need to be one of the guys to help. His main concern was no matter what happened, do not let go of Ron. When the time came, we all crowded around the bed. He told Ron to lay down. He asked me to lay beside him and picked another guy from Texas to lay on the other side. He made a big deal of how we were going to lock our arms and legs together so we were one lump of weight. With that said, we locked our legs and each of us had a hold of Ron's arms. The guy from Texas walked up to the bed, grabbed Ron's belt, and said, "This will do." With that, he reached down, undid Ron's belt, and unzipped his pants. Ron was fighting, and we both hung in there for dear life. Out of nowhere, a guy gave the Texas guy a can of shaving cream, who then proceeded to fill Ron's underwear with shaving cream. We all had a big laugh except Ron. Being a rather large guy, he wanted a piece of that Texan. When he wiggled away, the Texan ran out the door with Ron hot on his trail. They made a couple of laps around the pool, which was full of people, for a while. There was a lot of cussing and bad behavior. You should have seen the people scrambling out of the pool. Ron caught the Texan. They wrestled around and eventually fell in the water. Of course, you got to do that. This gave Ron time to realize what had taken place, and he started laughing. The Texan came over to him to shake hands, and they laughed after it was over. The rest of us gathered back in the room and drank their stash. We figured all was well until the manager came to our room. He told us that if our customer hadn't provided him with a lot of room sales during the last 5 years, we would all be out of there. Then he gave me a message from our boss to give him a call, just as soon as I received this message. It was about midnight, and Ron and I made the call. It took about 15 seconds for our boss to make it clear what our code of behavior was going to be for the rest of the training. So we were on our best behavior. Anybody can do it for a day. We finished the training and came home a day later.